Hello, my name is Dara Thomason of Stitch Quilting Co. and this is week 2 of how to use your cutting tools and how to cut out your fabric. So next week we'll be all ready to sew them all together. So this week we are going to be learning how to use the rotary cutter. And I know that I've had ladies come in to shops and classes and they have a fear of it. And really it is dangerous. It's really sharp and you want it to be nice and sharp. But it is, if you can use it properly, you're going to love it. It's going to save you so much time and effort, and the accuracy that it gives you is so incredible. So I'm going to show you how to cut using a rotary cutter. Now this is one of the Riley Blake basics, and it will have a high contrast on this lovely cute cut. In my past video I said a self-adhesive ruler, and I was like, self-adhesive? That's not right. It's a self-healing ruler. So when you use this sharp rotary cutter, it won't mark it completely and you'll be okay. So what we're going to do is when we have our rotary cutter and our ruler, I love this ruler. It has the nice grippies on it. And I'd spoken last time about the selvage edge. And so I know it's kind of difficult to see, but we have a different weave because it's tighter weave at the ends, and there's holes in it, the punctured holes for where it sits when it's being woven. And so we never want to include our selvage edge in any of the projects that we're using. So we're going to line up, and what I like to do is I actually like to use the lines in the grid of the mat and the lines of the ruler to help me make sure that I'm going to be able to make sure that is all nice and square. So I have, I just line up. So what I want to do is I want to line up my fabric with the lines on the ruler, okay? And then I also coordinate the lines in my ruler on the grid. So that's going to help me make sure that everything is nice and square. And so when I've done that, I then just line it up, and I want to use, I like that this ruler is 12.5 inches because it gives me that nice length. And so I'm going to line this up, making sure. Now, when you're using a rotary cutter, this Clover rotary cutter is really nice because it's both hands, left or right. And so also remembering the cover is really important to keep that on all the time. And so when you want to save your wrist, and so you can, this is the recommended way to hold it. And so we just have it, your wrist doesn't want to be too much of an angle and all wonky. You want to have it as nice and natural as possible. Just have a little bit of pressure and bring it off. Now one of the tips that I like is to keep your hand on your ruler and then take your thread off, your fabric off of it. Because if your blade isn't really that sharp and it doesn't quite get it all off, you're never really going to have it fully lined up. You might, but it just makes it easier. You don't have to spend that time readjusting and getting it just right. So keeping your hand on the ruler and then taking the fabric that's been cut off, and then that way you know it's nice and straight. The other thing that I recommend doing, so if I'm just going to cut now, let's just say I'm going to cut like a 2-inch strip. I'm going to do the same thing I just did. I'm going to line it all up, and then when I'm holding my ruler, and this really helps because the cute cuts, it has like some grippy on it, but it does tend to slide. So it's a good idea to have part of your hand on the ruler and part of your hand off of it. So it just gives that stability that's holding it on both places. So again, depress the cover, and you want to just hold it nice and firm and just bring it down, apply some pressure, and then just bring it off. Now this is a nice sharp blade, so it's coming off really nicely, but sometimes, especially if we don't have our blade going at an even pace or an even angle, then you'll have, you can have a few pieces that don't quite cut it, and it's not going to be as nice, and so look how nice and accurate, and that is so great. So that's my tips for using the cutter. I recommend, I have my smaller cute cuts, it's 18 by 20 I believe, or maybe a little smaller, it's right here, 18 by 12, yeah, or 15, and I keep that, no 12, I keep it beside my machine, and I have my little small cute cut rulers, And so if I wanted to square something up, I just keep it here, and then I have it when I'm finished doing a block, and that just is just really fast and easy. And then I have my ironing board here, iron, and I can just kind of speed up the process when I'm working. Okay, so I'm going to teach you how to go through the 9-patch wonder pattern. And so if you're following along with the pattern, I want you to think about, I talked about making the sets. So I think I have A sets. And so basically what I'm doing is I'm cutting out their strips of fabric, and then you're going to be sewing them all together. So this is what's called strip piecing. So here I have let's say this plaid is my A, this is my B, and then my A. So I have A, B, and A, and I'm connecting those ones together. And so this is my ABA, and then this one's going to be my BAB. So you can see I have that whole strip set. And so then when I have it all sewn together and I've pressed it, and I generally like to press the depending on, well, when I'm locking the stitches, I'm going to press this one, the BAB. I'm going to press these ones out, and then for this one I'm going to press these ones in, and I'm going to show you why that's so important. Okay, so now I'm going to take my ruler, and one of the things that you got to keep in mind is if you're right-handed or left-handed, and that makes a difference with your comfort zone of your cutting. Okay, so I'm going to line up my ruler, and so I don't obviously want to have these selvage edges, so I'm going to clean this up. So I'm just going to bring this off, keep my hand there, take off my scraps, and I keep all my scraps in a separate bin, and I use those to making dog beds. 1, 2, 3.5. They're 3.5 inches. And so if the strip is 3.5 inches, you're going to cut your strip sets 3.5 inches, okay? I use this ruler edge. So I'm going to use my ruler. So I want to have, so here we have, this is 1/2 inch. So here's 1/2 inch, 1 inch. So I'm going to want 3.5 inches. So this is my line that I'm going to line it up here on the ruler. So I know for sure that this edge is now straight, and I can still use these lines as a guideline just to kind of make sure that this ruler is sitting nice and straight. So I'm going to line up my 3.5 off, and there I have it. So now I have my 3.5. Now I'm going to need, for one 9-patch, I am going to need 2 of these and 1 of the opposite. So for the 9-patch wonder of the pattern that we have with this video, the blocks are 8 inches finished. And so when I cut my solid blocks, that's 8 inches I cut, and then when I put my 3-inch, I'm making 3-inch sets, and so when I squared it all up, it's going to be 8 inches as well. So I'm just going to show you the difference of how the different sizes. So if you modify, so here I have this sweet bunny. I absolutely love this fabric. Oh, I love a lot of fabrics. Okay, so these are 5.5 inch blocks, and so you see how big that is. So I made these big strip sets, and with that, now I have this adorable, oh, and remember this is a directional fabric, so I'll just put it like that for visual sake. So you see this, so it's a really fun, fast project that you can do. And in fact, if you don't want to do the 9-patch wonder, how we have it with the solid block and then the 9-patch and the solid block, you could actually just make a whole bunch of these sets and then do just a checkerboard quilt altogether. But by doing this way with the strip piecing, it's going a lot faster, okay? And it's also keeping it organized, and you can trim up your 9-patch squares, and then they can be nice and even. So that's a really great way of doing things. You can also have a few other examples. I love working with solids, and so this sweet little 9-patch, these came together really nicely. And if you notice on the back, I made sure that when I pressed to the dark side. And then because I did the opposite way on either set, when I'm going to sew them together, this one is going out to that side and that's going to the other, and so they actually lock into place. So there's a really, it's a really nice accuracy for piecing, which I really appreciate. And you know, we all try to do our best. So that's a really fun way. Now, I just wanted to mention, when I was making these strip sets, if you notice, this one has the white on the outside corners, and this has the I don't know what color is this, like a bluey green on the outside corners. So if you want them to go together like a checkerboard, how I was saying, that's how you would do a checkerboard for the whole quilt. But you have to keep that in mind, like what look do you want to have when you're doing your 9-patch wonder, and how that's going to look for you. So that's something to keep in mind when you're making your, so when you're deciding the ABA or the BAB, what's going to be your outside corners, and to keep that consistent. So when you're putting that together. Here's another example of the 9-patch that's just so cute, doing different patterns and designs. And here's that one done, all set up and ready to go with those strips. Okay, and then in the strip sets. So I'm just going to show you, now that you have maybe a little bit better idea of how the strip pieces go together, I'm just going to revisit the quilts, some of the quilt samples that I have for you, so you can kind of get an idea of what you like and what you don't like. And I'm going to be talking about just the placement and kind of getting a visual. So on this quilt, this was our strip sets that I spoke about, and this one has this really fun Mr. Fox, and having the same consistent sets together and pairing those fun colors. So this one's a super bright and colorful quilt. Another thing to consider when you're quilting is who's your audience, like who is this for? This is another one, and in fact, the reason I'm showing you this one is that you can make as many blocks as you want. So this is actually quite a large quilt, so I can't bring it all out, but you can see, so this would be for like a twin size bed. So this is doubled up, and I just love this fabric. Having biking heritage, it's super fun. So when my boys saw it, they were all fighting about who was going to get this quilt, so who knows. All right, so again, in these examples, we have a feature fabric, a fun print, with kind of a neutral 9-patch. And I think that's just really great standard kind of way to look at your organization. Here's another one. This one's super sweet with the alphabet in woodland creatures. So you can just see having, just kind of changing up, highlighting some of the fabric colors from the design. And of course these are geared for children. And these ones are a little bit larger in size than these ones. And so they go together a little bit quicker, and but when you're piecing, you have to make sure you have a larger backing and quilting. And then of course my bunnies, I just love these bunnies, they're so cute. And so that's the same idea. And here, I'm just going to kind of open this up a little bit, but in this one you can see that I didn't use any solid fabric. I just used coordinating prints that went along with the line. And so that just kind of adds an extra element to it. So you can totally do what you like, and it's totally your choice. So now these ones, so this one, Autumn Love, now that you're seeing this in a different way, you can tell that I didn't do strip piecing for all of these, because I have, in this quilt there are 25 blocks, 12 are solid. So I love this. This is like I think my favorite fabric of the collection. So I thought, well, I'm going to get the most of this one. And then I made different strip sets. So I paired them together. So here's a yellow and a blue. Here's another yellow and blue, but it's a different one. We have oranges and greens. I did the same kind of thing. So even though this is more of a scrappy look, when I was organizing it and selecting all my fabrics, I put oranges and greens together, blue and green, yellows and blues, and I tried to keep them fairly consistent, so it just kind of has more of a unified look, even though it's all pretty scrappy. So that one took a little bit more work for piecing because I had strip sets, but it was a lot of fun to make. Here's the gold, the rose gold. with the Rollie Blakes. Now, there's something to think about. When I made these strip sets, I made different strip sets. So these ones have the corners are with the gold on the corners, but then this one has the gold in the center. So the white is on the corners. A different look. So you can decide what you want. Okay, and the next one is the Rollie Blakes Basics. We have the hashtag with the dots. And one of the things to consider when you're selecting fabric is the age range that you're looking for, okay? And so I really love this hashtag fabric because it's a great filler that pairs really well with a lot of other fabrics. And then this one here is the larger hashtag version, so you have the smaller scale and the larger scale, and so depending on the look that you want, it's really great. And so one of the things I did with this quilt, because it was so colorful and so fun, was I did the yellow strip sets in the middle. So we have our ABA, so ABA, but then A, and then I have the two other colors, so they would be in their own strip sets. So that was really fun to do, and I think having the yellow centers, even though it's such a colorful quilt, it just kind of draws the eyes and keep it really cohesive. And then I did the circuit board quilting design, which we'll be talking about in future classes. Okay, and then the last one I want to show you, this actually is a fabric from my friend Julia. So she has this new fabric line with RJR, and so she sent me all her quilts. She lives in Nova Scotia, so she mailed me her quilts, and with the scraps of her quilt, I was able to make this top. But when I wanted to kind of have that look, oh, oops, threads everywhere, is I wanted to have all the corners be white and they would blend with the center block. And so it kind of has that look of kind of almost the Irish chain look in that. And so that's a whole other thing you can play with when you are creating your 9-patch. So the reason I call it 9-patch wonder is because it really does show such versatility in the fabric and the way that you select it and the way that you put it together. There's so many different considerations that go into such a simple quilt. So now I'm going to show you how to cut out your strip using your ruler in the work that you do. This is these really sweet fabrics. I gotta show them to you. This is from High Adventure 2, and actually I'm using these fabrics to make some quilts for Nuts for Bolts Quilting. I used to work there in Red Deer, and so she wanted me to make some quilt patterns and kit them up for her shop. So that was really fun. It's really fun for me to work on, and I had to play with all this beautiful fabric, and how fun is that? So I'm going to show you how to use your ruler to cut out strips, and then I'm also going to show you how to do this pattern using a layer cake. And so we talked about pre-cuts. So here's some beautiful pre-cuts in the 10-patch, in the 10-inch stackers, layer cakes or stackers, and so that way you can do it that way. So when you're cutting, this one I actually use a longer ruler because I want to have the whole length of the quilt. Now remember what I talked about with the selvage edge, we are not going to be including the selvage edge in our work. So what if I'm going to cut the whole thing, if I'm cutting up, I will just take out the whole selvage edge beforehand. And so that but if I'm not, I'll just cut my strips and then I'll cut the selvage edge off. It is a good idea to press this before you're doing it, just because when it is wrinkled this way, it just has the fold marks, it can work the way that the fabric is. Okay, so remembering, I'm going to straighten up my edge first. So I'm going to create this nice line for straightening up my edge. So I'm just going to bring this down and just slide this along. And so keep my hand on here, take off this thread, okay? So now I'm going to line up my ruler here, and I'm going to do 2.5-inch strips. So whether or not, and that's actually the length of a jelly roll, the width of a jelly roll. So if I have 2.5 inch strips, so I come in 1, 2.5, I line this up on my ruler, and then I take my cutter, and then I'm going to remember to keep part of my hand on the ruler and part of my hand on there, and then I'm just going to bring it across and just slide it over, and then I'm just going to, oops, see, I didn't get that all the way there. So now I'm going to just flatten this back. I'm going to, oh, I have a little tickle in my throat. Come back again, put a little bit more pressure. Excuse me. And there we go. So now I'm going to just slide my ruler down. I'm going to check. Sometimes when the fabric is folded, it isn't exactly straight on one with the other. So when I'm cutting off my selvage edge, I'm just going to fold this one back, and I'm just going to bring this and straighten that up, and just flip this over and do the same thing here. It's always a good idea to have your fabric nice and straight. And we're just going to line this up just like that. Just cut it, and there you go. All right, so that's how you use your cutter for that. And so so if you're going to make your strip sets, and this is your A, and this is your, I like to have a contrasting. You could even do the same print. Your A, B, A, and then you're going to do it the other way. So, and you'll see it on the pattern. And so you can decide how you want to do it. And now that you've seen all these different examples of different quilts, you're like, oh, I really like it when it's like super uniform and it's the same, or I really like it when it's different. So it's totally your choice. And then the other thing to keep in mind is at the end, when we're ready for binding, your binding strips are 2.5 inches. So then this would be how you prepare your binding. But we'll get into that. I'll review that once more. Okay, so if you are using a layer cake, and so you have all these beautiful designs, I just laid it all out. I love this one by Christopher Thompson. Yeah, pretty sure it's Thompson. The Tattooed Quilter. This is such Blue Caroline. I love this line. It's so beautiful. And so you decide what fabrics you want to use. So your inside blocks, so these blocks, every block on the inside will be different, because in layer cakes, they have 2 of the same fabric, okay? So you can choose, so you're going to have 12 fabrics that are your inside pieces. So like here, I had the really sweet little multicolored polka dots as my center. But if you're going to use a layer cake, then you're going to want to use this one, and then you'll cut off the 2 inches on either side. And this is a really good use of using your cube cuts. So this is your, to square this up. So what you're going to do is you're going to line up to find your 8-inch square. So you come over, now remember this is a 1/4 inch seam, so you have to allow that for when you're cutting. But you line this up, 8-inch square, and then you can cut that. And with the extra, with the 2 inches that's left over, you can do whatever. There's lots of patterns that you can just sew strips together and make a different pattern. So then you can do your cut your 8-inch blocks for your center, and then for your 9 patch, you would then use, you can use this, I would prefer this ruler. And so you come along and you do your 3-inch strips. So 1, 2, 3, and then you can then you do your AB, you can decide of that. And because you have 2 pieces of fabric of the same one, so what I would do is just go through this beautiful collection and decide. And what I recommend is you have kind of a contrast. So I would want to have, this would work well, but I think this one, so we have 3 of these same prints, but they all have the different backings. And so I like to have that contrast. So to find a pairing where it's going to be that contrast, or if you wanted to do more of a subtle, that's totally fine, and that's completely up to you in how you want to place that. But just play around a little bit with that, and that's totally available to you to use a layer cake for making this pattern as well. Also, if you wanted to use the Rollie Pollie, which is right here, this one is 3.5 inches, and so then you would decide, and if you wanted, you could use the Rollie Pollie for that one, and then you'd find, I think this one would look actually really cute with this. This is my favorite fabric of this line. So then you can make these 3-inch strips, and then if you wanted with the yardage, you could cut this with the 8-inch, the solid, and then you'd have like the polka dots kind of peeking out, almost kind of the same idea as this one with the white. So having that look. So completely up to you. You see what I'm talking about? I get so excited when I see all the different possibilities of the things that you can do with your pre-cuts, with your fat quarters, with your layer cakes, with your yardage. So I'm really excited to see you putting them all together. So essentially in this class, we've got using your tools. So you have your rotary cutter and your ruler with your mat, deciding how you're going to be cutting that one. We also need to do some planning. So I talked about the planning in how you want to lay out your block. And so you can either draw it out on paper, you can do like a dry erase board and kind of play with it. If you're computer savvy, you can kind of play around with that and putting different fabrics in there. And we talked about the cutting instructions. And so if you have other questions or any problems, please just ask me. I'm here to help you to do that. And when you have your pattern in hand, remember, as I said, read the whole pattern first and then using that. Another tip that I really like, and I really love using my Wonder Clips to help me organize. As I was mentioning, I was making some quilts, strips, and so I've got my sets with my Wonder Clips, and they just help me keep really organized. And if I wanted to be ultra organized, I could just put a little label here saying this is strip set A or strip set whatever one it is, and it just keeps things really under control. So for people who really love that, I love the Wonder Clips. They're just a really great tool to use. So happy cutting. Please show me your pictures of your fabric pulls. Please show me your progress pictures. And next week we're going to be getting the sewing machines out and start our sewing. So happy sewing.